Okay, cool. Welcome to 646. My name is Dawson McManus. We're sitting online with Dune Butler from the General Mojos out of Seattle, Washington. How you doing, man?
That's right. I'm doing great. I'm happy to be here. Good to see you again.
Yeah, absolutely. You guys completely melted my brain at Gusapalooza, just outside, or is in Cookstown? Yeah, in Cookstown in Ontario. Um, that was the band's first tour to Canada, right?
Yeah, it was our first time to Canada. It was part of an East Coast run that was also our first time out that way. So we couldn't have been we couldn't have been happier with getting the opportunity to do that. And it was mainly due to Gusapalooza that kind of gave us the push to go out that way. So we had an absolute blast and met some great people like you. Had some really good
Oh,
times. Um,
right on.
yeah,
Cool. I'm glad that Canada was hospitable to you guys. You played in Hamilton and Toronto, right?
yeah,
Yeah, nice. Yeah, my pretty regular stomping grounds for me.
yeah. It was great. Like the people were really cool. The vibes were really cool. We went out kind of every day in each town to like check out some shops, go thrifting, and then got to meet everyone at the different venues, so a couple different bands, and it was just like I don't know, really, really warm reception and really great vibes. So we were stoked.
That's great. I have to say, I'm not terribly surprised you guys were well received because your band is fucking awesome. like,
Thanks,
uh,
thanks, man. I mean that's kind of what I'm talking about. We just felt really appreciated, really welcomed, and we're really happy to come out there and get to share our music and what we do.
well, what you guys do is really cool. It's. I mean, it says right in your bio that you're a psychedelic pop band, and that is very apt. But I do think that not everybody has those heavy duty psych elements, but has an easily like pop digestible kind of format. I find a lot of people struggle to do that, but you guys were pretty seamless with it, really. Like the hooks were all there. The especially the vocal harmonies are very pop sensibility, but then when you go off into the jammy stuff live, especially, it gets really weird and really trippy, and especially for nerds like me, when you do those really cool kind of polyrhythmic things that I'm a big fan of, or when you go off into I would say for pop music especially atypical harmony kind of ideas, but you don't overdo it. It's like you kind of freak people out for a second and then you come back in with a hook, and it's, it's really cool. It is. You do feel slightly intoxicated when listening to your music, even if you're not, which I think is that's a real challenge to be able to achieve. But you guys do it very well.
Thank you. I mean that's you're. I feel like we a lot of people like what we do. There's some people where it really resonates with them and they really get it. I feel like you're one of those people that really kind of understands what we're trying to do. Like we're we want to play bangers, like get people hooked on like some pop kind of sensibility and stuff. But then, we're also music nerds and we're kind of explorative people and improvisers as well. And we want to be able to go on a journey within that music and then always bring it back home to something that people can walk away and feel like they remember some of the hooks, can sing along to something and go check out the recordings as well, but then keep the shows fresh to where no show is ever the same exact thing. There's always room for, we're not I I think it comes across this way, but like I wouldn't call us a conventional jam band where we're jamming for days, but we have these jam moments as well as a lot of real arranged and constructed moments as well.
Oh yeah, for sure. Where things are, like you said, constructed or heavily arranged, like you can hear it, and then where you guys allow each other to be really free, it feels like from an outsider's perspective, it feels like you have either a cue that somebody will do to be like, okay, we're going back to the head or whatever it's going to be, or maybe a set number of measures. Maybe I'm not sure, but it's like it feels like there's something to kind of go. We're headed back, as opposed to just doing like kind of heads up hockey, because you guys are also extremely animated on stage. So
Yeah, it depends on the tune and the arrangement, but all like it's kind of what you're talking about, where there's a variety of different cues. Sometimes there's a solo section that's like the same length every time. A lot of times something is very open, and then when a certain guitar melody comes back in and we hear it, we know that's when we're going to a certain thing. Um, I think that I'm really inspired by bands that have that kind of language built into their music. I
yeah,
think there's lots of examples of bands that do that, but one that sticks out to me is there's this instrumental modern jazz group called Knee Body that's like anywhere from 6 to 8 piece. That I've seen them. It's been a few years, but I've seen them. They have this monster drummer. I kind of want to know his name. Hold on. Um,
sure.
he plays in a few different few different groups. Oh, Nate Wood.
Okay. I'm not familiar. Can you say that band name again? I really want to check these guys out.
They're called Knee Body.
Knee Body. Okay.
They're like a real modern instrumental jazz group, and it you hear the word instrumental jazz and you're like, okay, they like swing, but no, it's like very rhythmically driving, very clever produced, and a lot of crazy sounds, like a lot of effects on the horns, and it's music that you want to dance to. Like Knee Body is a good. It's just like got a real strong backbeat. But to bring back kind of their inspiration, um, they have a ton of that they've talked about in interviews and stuff, but a ton of built-in musical motifs that when someone starts playing a certain thing, they know it's time to go to the next section. And it's a real I, I hesitate to use the word basic, but it's a real concrete way to move the music along. But I think when you're someone watching a band, especially if you're only seen them a couple times, it's a real seamless seeming way that the music can move along, because you don't know what that cue is going to be, and all you
Right.
see from the audience is you just see a band suddenly shift to like a new section, and you're like, that's really great. But it's a real, like I said, concrete, useful type of tool in that setting.
100%. Yeah, those kind of tried and true things, like on this, either this big build on the drums, or this guitar player does this, or this bass line rolls to X, like you said, a motif, or that, where it's like we've got 32 bars. And by the end of that, we're moving on, which maybe 32 might be, that might be a lot depending on the tempo, but but depending on how weird you want to get, that might be just the right amount. So, but I'm a big fan of doing that also. Like there's uh man, I would say one and a half bands that does that kind of stuff that I get to play with, where there will be some spots are just like really extended, and you wait for one
Mhm.
cue or another, and then you're like, okay, time to move. And I agree, it's super fun, because when you've got bandmates like you guys have got in General Mojo's, you're probably hearing shit that you've never heard, like pretty tight friends ever have done before, and you may never hear them do it again. And that's exciting, and it keeps the shows fresh, not only for your audience but for you guys as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, and it's the I think it kind of pushes each other within the group to keep striving to surprise each other and do something new. And there's a few tunes, like one of the tunes I think you're hitting on, especially with the polyrhythmic stuff, is a tune of ours called Coyote Song.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah.
that tune has a lot of a couple different sections that really breathe quite a bit. And it also like has gone through a lot of phases depending on what kind of mood, or like we'll be on the road for like a few months at a time and never doing a rehearsal, and like halfway through that few months suddenly Raul will he's doing like a big rhythmic thing that we're doing like a big guitar solo over, and then sometimes he'll suddenly suck it all out and go to like the most minimal drum thing, and we're all sitting there like whoa, and then really quickly we jump on it, and suddenly the section is a completely different feel than we've done before, and it's really exciting. But we always know that at a certain point the vocal's going to come soaring back in at the very end. It's going to tie the whole room together and bring us home. And that tune in particular is one of my, I think as a band and as an audience member, it's one of our favorites to really showcase that kind of playing.
Yeah, I know that one specifically out of the set you guys did at Gus. That one really floored me, especially with those crazy high falsettos that oh no, the keyboard player.
So yeah, on keys it's Natalie Colvin.
Thank you. That's embarrassing. I
Oh no. I mean, so we're a four-piece, right? I'm Dune Butler, as you were saying. Natalie Colvin is keys, David James is guitar, and Raul Hardin is drums. And all of us do some singing and some background vocals depending on the song. And yeah, there's a lot of vocal improv on that tune. There's a lot of guitar spotlight. There's like a moment that's a guitar drum duet that kind of transitions us from one part of the tune to the other. And it's interesting because it's an old song and the recording is good. I mean, the recording's great, but it's very much a time and a place, and it was with a different lineup of people. And I've had a lot of people that have seen the old band and the new one, and they're like, man, you got to re-record that song because it's like totally a new entity now. And it's something we've thought about, but we also have so much new music coming out that I think maybe a live record is on the horizon someday, but
that would be cool.
Yeah, I think it could be pretty cool to do a live record. It's something we've never really done. We got some live video out there, but not like a live at Gusapalooza or something.
Yeah, that would be sick because I do like your guys' studio work like quite a bit. I think it's very well mixed. The production is awesome on it. It's really cool stuff, but there is an energy that you guys have all together on the stage. I think also like with any band, when there's a crowd feeding you their energy, it creates that really sweet positive feedback loop that is really hard to replicate in a studio setting. But also maybe because I'd never heard your guys' stuff before, when I saw it live, it was just, and we had been hanging out, the day before and getting to know you guys before I heard you play. I was like, I've got a feeling these guys are going to be really good. But I was also really hopeful because you guys were super cool. So I was like,
Yeah, that was, I mean, that was so great. Like we rolled into the festival Friday night and, we didn't know anyone. We knew the promoter, Russ,
yeah.
but you and, oh man, what?
Brent.
Sorry, what was it?
Brent,
that's right. Yeah. You and Brent were camped right next to us, and you're like the first two guys we met, and I don't know, we all hit it off immediately, walked over to the festival, started watching some music, and then ran into each other later that night at the kind of improvised jam by the fire,
Yeah.
and then got to do the show the next day. And so it was, yeah, that was really fun.
Oh, I have to ask you because, and I didn't get the chance at Gus. When you guys did that mashup of Time, Rocket Man, and Use Me Up, which was as soon as the three of you started doing that, I was like, I'm so glad that my suspicion is confirmed that these cats are the shit. This is great. Okay, when you were doing Time, the clock ticking that you're doing on the bass with the flat pick, did you also see that documentary that Floyd put out where, okay, because I'm like, there's only one way that you know how to do that the right way, and that's by watching that Floyd doc. He must have seen it. And okay, cool. That's so rad.
That is the sound that's on the record is Roger
Yes,
Waters
it is.
doing that on his bass as well. And yeah, that we do a lot with those tunes. Like as you said, there's a full mashup that we kind of reorder the tunes. That's one of our really fun cover arrangements, and we do that in our set, more so when we have like a longer set. Like we travel around and do a variety of different shows. Sometimes we play for like 3 hours, and but in that thing, like it's just something I kind of, like you said, kind of new to do. The arrangement itself is quite a bit different from the song, but it's all about, I mean, it's all, music is for everyone, but there's some folks who really, you connect on things like that, like yourself, who would be like, you're like, I've nerded out to that. I know about Dark Side of the Moon and what the sounds, and you get to kind of egg people like that in the audience on. You're like, oh yeah, you definitely got it. And you're a bass player too, so when bass players like Roger Waters do that kind of something with the instrument you'd never associate it with.
Right? Like what an outside the box idea. Like I can't find the ticking clock sound I'm after. I'll just make it myself on my bass. What a crazy idea.
They're in the studio and they got tons of sounds that they could choose from. Wood block, percussion, maybe a synthesizer thing, but he's like, "Oh, we're gonna do this on the bass," and it's so cool.
It's so cool. I'm such a Floyd freak, like an absolute fanatic. So as soon as you started doing it, I was like, okay, this guy knows what's up. And then also like that really gorgeous old school Hofner that you pulled at. That was the other thing too. When I saw the Hoff, I was like, okay,
Yeah.
you don't have one of those if you don't know what you're doing.
I mean, it's an amazing instrument. I got it about 2 or 3 years ago, and obviously the Beatles are like probably the most associated with that bass, Paul McCartney. But the thing that really sold me on it, I played a couple at some studios, and I was like, man, this thing, it's got this really petite look to it, but it's such a powerful and dynamic bass. And then I got very into Tame Impala, and all of their studio stuff is done with a Hofner as well, which is some real modern sounding like trip hop bass stuff. And that's really what sold me, is like that instrument is still very relevant, and when people don't even know it. And and so it's been a joy to add that bass to my arsenal.
Yeah, it sounds great. Obviously, the aesthetic of the thing is absolutely gorgeous. Also, I really appreciate you letting me play it, considering you had no idea if I was just gonna shit the bed or or what. You're just like, oh, okay, man.
Well, I mean, it's a similar kind of thing where as soon as we started talking, I was like, okay, these guys get it. You and Brent, like you, it was pretty obvious that you were like kind of in the world we were, and that you would be able to treat an instrument like that with respect. Because I don't know, I instruments are they're very personal to people, right? And they're very a bass like that is they're very personal, but like being able to share in that and nerd out with other people is like kind of the best part. Is like,
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
you get to sit in the audience and you're like, ooh, someone else is like kind of doing something with my baby, and I get to kind of hear their version of how to play it, and it's really, I don't know, I love that kind of stuff. So
That's great. I have to say I was a little embarrassed at my playing. I haven't played a 4-string in, God, it's at least 5 years since I started playing in 5 for pit band work, and I just fell in love, and I hadn't played a 4-string in a very, very, very long time, other than a little bit of session work, but like not just jumping up and jamming, and it was, my playing wasn't great, so it was
I
like
thought it
I
was
wish.
great, and it was all,
Well,
we were all sitting in with like different people we'd never played with before, and I recognized like pretty immediately. I was like, oh yeah, that's not surprising that you totally got it going on as a bass player musician. And I know what you mean. I played a 5-string for almost a decade, and
right.
I switched like about a decade ago. I stopped playing it, and one of the first times I was at a jam and the only bass available was a 5-string, and I'd been playing 4-string for a long time, and I was like, I know what that's about. And you get on it and you're like, it's almost like first of all, when I played a 5-string and would switch to 4-string, it felt like you were missing a tooth or something. Like you go to there's like your whole like where your hand is, and like kind of some of your impulses are like, it's like, whoa, it's like a phantom limb or something. And then adding a 5-string, and having been going to the 4-string for a while, suddenly this whole new thing is added, and it's really jarring if you're not switching back and forth pretty regularly, I think. So I kind of
Yeah.
I understand what you're saying with that a lot.
Yeah, dude, I love the analogy of the missing tooth, because that is exactly what it feels like. It was like, oh, none of the like vertical grips that I'm really used to are here anymore.
Mhm.
Um, and then also, what I really, now on the Hoff, it's much easier to get that woolier sound than my primary is a 5-string Warwick, so it's a very modern sound. But if I want that like woolier, that more woolly timbre, I'll just play on the lower strings but further up the neck to get that roundness. And sometimes when I'm looking for that, it's like, oh, okay, that's not available. And it's like, oh shit, you have to almost, I don't know, try to relearn while you're jamming, and it's
Yeah.
maybe not the most comfortable feeling in the world, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then after you guys had just done, I think like, well, you did the mashup and then a couple other tunes, and I was like, oh my god, now I have to play in front of these killers.
Oh man.
And I am not going to play well. And I knew it too. I was like, oh, I'm going to shit the bed. But
Oh, it was
well.
it was great, and that setting too. Like I remember the bass in particular was going out, was direct into the PA, and there was no monitors, and
Yeah.
it wasn't it's definitely not the most ideal situation, but I enjoyed your playing. It was fun to do it. Getting in on a jam like that is like, do you go out to jams much, or did you ever at any point
I
in your life?
used to.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, like I used to do them all the time, but I would always, you're just usually expected to bring your own gear, right? And so getting up and playing with other people is not, that never unnerves me anymore, and hasn't for a very long time. But playing on unfamiliar gear is something that is always a little bit of a like, okay, here we go. This feels weird. I don't know. It's sort of like it kind of feels like you're wearing somebody else's underwear. It's like it's exciting, but it's a little weird.
Well, and I know what you mean. I have I used to I used to go out to a lot of jams in Seattle. I took a pretty big pause, not intentionally, but just life and the world changed for a while where a lot of that stuff wasn't happening.
Yeah.
And recently I've been kind of rediscovering that jam culture. And, I typically will bring an instrument if I'm planning to play, but it gives you a lot of respect for people that play something like drums or maybe piano, where they're pretty regularly they're playing someone else's gear, especially at a jam, like the drum kit set up.
Oh yeah.
And you're getting back there, and suddenly you're wearing someone else's underwear, and you're like, this is how they wear their underwear. It's crazy.
Yeah.
But the whole,
wow, I never thought about that.
yeah, the world of jamming it's such a humbling experience, because I think when you're young and you're going out there to play, you're sitting there and you're kind of jacked up, and you're nervous, and you're like, I'm gonna get up there and totally do this certain thing and really show people what I can do. But if you get up there, I mean, that is rarely the case where you get to go up and do that at a jam. Like, you're getting up there with, you don't know who you're going to play with. And when you're in the role of a bass player, depending on the type of bass player you are or whatever, for the most part, you're like, I need to like hold this down and make everyone feel like they're at home. And that can be a varying task depending on who you're trying to like make feel at home. Like, sometimes you got to put it right where it's got to be and kind of hold the whole ship together.
Oh yeah, dude. So often it's like you're just peddling roots, and that's your job for right now. And then every once in a while you get to cut loose, but for the most part, if somebody notices the bass, it's because something has gone wrong, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, especially like you were saying, like when you're jamming. When I first got out of school, I remember going to a couple of jams. I'm like, I'm gonna show everybody all this cool modal shit and just nothing classy about what I was playing. It was all very slutty playing. And I remember a singer turning around. He's like, "Don't do that." I was just like, "Oh, okay."
No, it's yeah.
Just so like, you're just so horny when you first, learn all that stuff. You're like, check that shit out, and it's like, yeah, man, maybe just play the groove. Like,
yeah. I was at a jam the other night, and it's a pretty cool jam here in Seattle that I've been to a handful of times. It's very Afro-Cuban based, and it doesn't it's a lot of improv. It doesn't function like a typical jam. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's definitely not like it's not like a jazz jam where everyone's playing over tunes. Everyone's creating a modal kind of Afro-Cuban jam. And I remember there was a handful of people who went through the night, and it was my turn to play, and the jam leader like came up to me, and he was like, "You're up." And I was like, "Cool." He's like, "Play some of the grooves." And I was like, "Okay, cool." And that's, he was right on the money with it, where that's the task, especially the bass player.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like, one of the best bass lessons I ever got actually was from a drummer, and he was, and one of the things he told me, he was like, "Oh, geez, I would have been 18, maybe 19 at the oldest," and he goes, "You only play when I hit my bass drum." I was like, okay.
Yeah.
Because everything I was doing was way too busy. And he's like, no, you're gonna right now. You're just gonna hit on 1 and 3 and don't do anything else. It was like,
Totally.
okay,
I
cool.
it's that's a when you start to realize as a bass player, like there's music, obviously there's really great pockets and great music where the bass player is playing off of the drummer and not just playing with the kick drum, but there's a lot of music where
Sure.
you start playing with the kick drum and everyone in the band is like amazed at how good it feels. They're like, wow, you really locked in with the drummer. And that's another, it kind of harkens back to what we were talking about earlier with like a musical cue to move a section on. It's another example of something that's a real concrete, realistic thing you can do in a groove where it's like, oh, I'm just gonna play what the kick drum's doing, and everyone is like, this feels like a magical. Like, how do you know how to do that? And it's like I'm watching the drummer's foot,
Yeah.
and I'm
Yeah.
doing,
Or you can see the front of the head just flutter at you. You're like, okay.
yeah, yeah, and I often will go to that at least as a starting place, and as soon as you start doing that, then you know how to dance around it or something. But it's great.
Oh yeah, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I love playing really weirdly syncopated things or playing very very melodic lines or whatever. Like, I love doing all that stuff, but sometimes running with the devil is exactly what you're supposed to do,
Mm-hmm.
and and there's nothing wrong with that. Like, sometimes that's just the coolest method, but
Yeah.
other times it is fun to pretend to be Les Claypool. So it just
Yeah, yeah,
depends.
yeah. My big guy for that kind of thing is John Entwistle from The Who. Like,
Oh yeah.
they have a really crazy pocket that it only really works with that because of their rhythm section. John, Keith Moon, and Pete Townsend on guitar, like they create something that when you switch out any one of those players, kind of doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
They're it's one of my favorite examples. But similarly, like the other stuff I'm really into is, well, not I there's a lot of other stuff, but like I went, one of the first types of music I studied beyond like the classic rock world was I started playing upright bass and jazz music, and in a lot of that, the bass player is often almost is either playing with the kick drum or functioning as a kick drum and just playing quarter notes. And so I went from like melodic bass that does whatever it wants to timekeeper. And I think my playing is now somewhere in both of those worlds, kind of connecting them. And then you take a band like Tame Impala or the Beatles too is a really classic example, but where the bass is a melody, like, and it's often playing a repeated type of melodic line, which also gives the music a way to have a home base. But it's very counterpoint driven.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite things that Paul McCartney does a lot of is he makes this really cool blend of a walking bass line with the vocal melody. And I think that is just such a great idea. But he won't always, like, when he does the vocal melody thing, he might start on the same pitch, but he never stays he never completely follows it in unison. It'll be some kind of parallel harmony to what's happening with the vocal line, but rhythmically will be very, very close, somewhere in between the melody and a walking line, which I think is so cool because it adds, like you said, that counterpoint. It adds such a great feeling of movement, but it's still really glued because it does have that kind of walky feel to it, which
Yeah.
was great. And
Yeah, there's I mean
um,
there's like some great examples I think of something you're talking about is like the bass line to something the George Harrison
Mm.
tune. And it's funny,
Yeah, yeah.
there's I mean the Beatles obviously we could go on forever about them. They're the best for a reason, but yeah, that bass line something do do she moves do 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 do.
Yeah.
It's like so great. I mean,
absolutely. Yeah. Oh man, there's so many iconic lines. One of the first ones that when I was a kid that really I thought was so fun to play was um oh no. I've lost it. Um Oh darling. God, that was a weird brain fart. So sorry about that. But that line when I was like, I don't know. It was high school anyway. I can't remember how old I was. I was pretty young, but high school was like, this is one of the coolest bass lines of all time. And which was funny because right around the same time I was so obsessed with Rage Against the Machine, and Tim Comerford was like one of the top dogs. And then going from like Calm Like a Bomb to Oh Darling was such a pretty stark juxtaposition in terms of mood. But
yeah, but it's like I remember Rage Against the Machine. I I got turned on to them in high school, and it's funny you say that. Like I got really into the Beatles probably around the same time in high school, and also not got into Rage Against the Machine, but kind of had friends that were into it, and digesting those two worlds. They are kind of worlds apart in a lot of ways, but then also I don't know, they're both fantastic bands. So
yeah, I would say I feel anyway that the common thread between those two groups is the massive blues influence on both. Like they are like, I mean, shoot, especially that first Rage record. Almost every song is a minor pentatonic, where they also include the tritone, and they use the major seven as well as the minor seven just to get that chromaticism really, really
yeah,
going. But like, it's just like almost every Rage song is just a minor pentatonic, which is so crazy.
yeah,
On the first record, I mean, they obviously branched out later, but
yeah. I'm trying to think. My Rage knowledge is not super in depth, but I know the Killing in the Name of that
Mm.
that riff in the middle of it is kind of like you said, "Oh Darling" by the Beatles is like it's kind of a doo-wop swing thing, and that
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Feeling in the Name of is like a more up tempo, but it's still very like it's got a swing, real classic feel
Oh,
to it.
big time.
The way they're just laying into it and the sound of the band is not. It's not. It's a very fresh take on a very classic feel.
yeah, those dudes would always, and that's not, I shouldn't say always, but they would. There was a real bounce to everything. I mean, of course, the hip hop influence also gave them a lot of that kind of like kind of feel that just. But it was yeah, I was so into them. There was a time where the first record, I could play the bass line and the guitar line and could rap every track off the first album. I was way too into it. I didn't have a whammy pedal though, so none of the guitar solos sounded right.
Yeah, that's a big part of his Tom Morello stuff is the sounds, and you maybe didn't have
Yeah.
a fill either to hold against it or whatever he did.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I did. I was missing a lot of effect. Well, effects pedals are expensive, and when you just have enough money to buy a new pack of strings, you're not really going out and getting.
Yeah, what's your pedal game like these days?
Oh, sure. It's not terribly extensive. I do have a whammy pedal now. Because I always wanted one, and I had a '90s review band for a little while, and one of the tracks we were doing was "Just" by Radiohead, and the guitar solo at the very end. There's this whammy pedal thing, and it just sounds super wrong without it. So I lent it. I lent it to my older brother, who was the guitar player for that band, and I bought it just initially just for that. But I also was like, I'm gonna use this whenever this band isn't playing. I'm gonna use this to play Rage songs and fulfill that childhood dream. I have a Crybaby, two Crybabies. One's for bass, one's for guitar. I've got the I've got the Line 6, the DL4.
Oh yeah.
The big green unit, but it's it's like a re-release kind of thing. So they've got more modern settings, which is pretty cool. And I've got a distortion pedal, and that's it for effects. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I know you have that Space Echo, but that you run that as a vocal processor, right?
Yeah, I use that as a vocal. My pedal game is somewhere in the neighborhood of years, not like super big. And it's also something I didn't get into until like 3 or 4 years ago. I was pretty,
Dude, same.
yeah, yeah. I just never, I mean, it's great. It's great to have pedals, but it's also, I don't know, like when you're chasing a sound and you don't know what it is, and then you suddenly find the tool that gets you there, and you're just like, oh, this is it. And with my vocal stuff, when you're on the road and dealing with different sound engineers every night, you have a varying degree of how much give a shit that they have and how much they're going to understand what your music is. And don't get me wrong, there's great sound engineers you work with.
Yes, there are. Yes,
A lot of times the great sound engineers that I do work with, they see that vocal pedal in line, that delay, and they're like, oh, do you really want to use that? Like, I can do delay on my end. And I get that. I get that feeling. And I think the dream is you're touring with a sound engineer who knows when to implement the sound and when to pull it out. And I do all that on my end. So for the most part, I'm like, trust me, you'll see kind of what I'm doing, because it's pretty active involvement. On my vocal delay, I have a few different tape heads. It models an Echoplex or a Space Echo. It models an old Roland tape delay, but it's in a Boss pedal. And so it has a handful of different heads that tape Echo had. And it also has a tap tempo on it, so I can tap the timing of the delay in real time with my foot. And it has a button that speeds the delay up, so it does like these big delay throws and feedback loops, and I can toggle it off and on. So I'm doing a lot of that in real time. And for the most part, like a sound engineer, it actually happened at Gustapalooza, where the sound engineers were great. They were super great, but they saw me setting that vocal pedal up, and they're like, oh, are you sure we can do something like that? And I was like, well, you definitely do. Sorry, I'm rattling through this. But they were like,
no, please.
They were like, or I was like, you can definitely do some verb on your end, any compression, but I like to be able to have this control. And at the end of the set, they came up and they were like, that's so cool what you're doing with that pedal. I totally understand why you want to be in control of that part of it, because in the music, I go back to Kevin Parker and Tame Impala, because they're a big influence, but they're not the only band that does this. But their delay, especially on the vocal and the mix, is out of this world involved. It's huge, and it is so much a part of the music, and I really am pretty inspired by that. And so when I went through a number of vocal pedals. There's a few processing pedals, like the big red Boss pedal, and really didn't like them, and ended up going with it's not even a vocal pedal, it's a delay pedal. And I was
Yeah,
like,
I have one.
yeah. And I was like, this thing does one thing really well. And versus a lot of other vocal processors that try to do all sorts of things moderately
Mm.
well. Um, and that's my experience. Don't get me wrong. I've seen people with those different vocal pedals and get a lot of great sounds with them. But I like to work.
Yeah, but I mean, there's definitely something to be said for being comfortable on stage. Like if you've got the thing that makes you go, that's the sound I'm hunting. Because like you were saying, how involved everything you're doing is, watching you do it on stage, it's almost like trying to manipulate a whole other instrument on top of everything else that you're already doing. It's like when Geddy plays the Moog with his feet. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's a very similar thing with how much you're doing, like with those tap tempos, and like you said, when you, for anybody listening, if you change the timing of a delay, it creates a very bizarre but really cool and impactful sound effect. I encourage any young musician that's mucking about with effects, try it. It's really cool. It's really, really cool. But
Mhm.
and the way that you use it is, it's such a cool effect, and because of how psychedelic your guys' sound is, it's so fitting too. It's not coming out of nowhere and like abrasive. It's like that is exactly what should be happening right now.
Thanks, man. I I'm glad it's coming across that way. Uh it's cool you mentioned Geddy Lee. That's another big influence of mine. And he does a lot of things all at once. Like he'll be doing bass,
Yeah.
foot bass, maybe something with his hands, and
Yep.
singing lead. And early on, I saw a documentary with him because as you know, doing bass and vocals at the same time is already
Yeah.
a pretty complicated world. Um,
Yep.
and I saw him early on bass was my first instrument. Vocals came a bit later, but when I was first singing and playing bass at the same time, I never questioned it. But don't get me wrong, it's a constant journey. But early on, I saw an interview with Geddy Lee where they were like, "How do you do all these bass lines, vocals, synth stuff all at once?" And he was just like, "Well, if you sit down with something and practice each part individually and then combine them, he's like, you can play anything if you just sit down
Yep.
and take the time to put the pieces together." And it was like, for me, it was like a light bulb. I was like, oh, anything I can't do right off the bat, I just need to go and take some time to develop it. And that's really fun because when you are putting pieces together like that, maybe over the course of a couple days or like something you're working on for months, and then you wake up one morning to put them together and they finally click, it's like
Yeah.
such a great feeling.
Yes. I 100% agree. It is an extremely satisfying feeling to have those puzzle pieces finally come together. Um, there's a there's a point in I told you I'm in a David Bowie tribute, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So there's a point in the show where I have to play bass and harmonica at the same time, and at first I was like, oh, okay, this is really weird, especially because you ever use a harmonica yoke before?
Mm, no, not really. I've
Okay.
maybe messed around with it, but I've always been curious about how they freaking work. But
Well, unfortunately, they have this horrible tendency, the screws, because like to get a really good seal on the harmonica, so that it doesn't sound really breathy and spitty and gross, you have to push into the harmonica, and the the screws, the threads on yokes, at least in my experience, always start to fall. So while you're playing, you're kind of chasing your harmonica as it as it dips away from you. So it took me a long time to figure out, at least for me. I just set my harp right on the microphone so that it's not going anywhere.
Or push
And
back.
then yeah, but not being able to control it with my hands was a very strange, because I'd only ever done one or the other, and then trying to stack the two was weird, especially because harmonica is it's a double reeded instrument, so there's a blow sound and a draw sound. So yeah, so trying to figure that out and not fuck up your hands was like it was a bit of a mind bender at first, but it was like, okay, there it is. And the first day that I could do it well, I was like, oh, cool. And that was pretty rad. So I know what you mean.
What Bowie tune in particular? I'm a big fan of
That
Bowie, so I'm curious.
Oh, okay, cool. Well, that one specifically, it's a mashup of, I wouldn't say a mashup. It's more like a medley is probably a more correct term. We start with Gene Genie, and then go into Diamond Dogs, and then from there go into Rebel Rebel, but from the reality tour in early 2000s, which was really fun. It was neat, actually. I was not well versed in Bowie before I joined this band, and now I'm super into it. I just didn't know. I mean, I knew, like, Space Oddity and Suffragette City and, like, the usual suspects, Changes, like that kind of shit, but, like, I didn't know that there was an album called Hunky Dory, you know what I mean? Or, like, I'd never heard Stay before. I'd never heard Absolute Beginners or Width of a Circle, or, like, any of the, like, especially that one is, this band will probably never do that song, though. It's too weird. And
There's so much. But I'm similar with Bowie, where I knew the hits, but a friend of mine gave me the book probably 5 years ago. My old roommate gave me the book Bowie in Berlin, which documents his Berlin years, which is like and the Heroes album, and I always forget the third one, the one right after Heroes. But that one really opened my eyes to that whole period. And
yeah, that's when he was working a lot with Iggy Pop.
Iggy Pop and Brian Eno.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's, oh my God, so much great tunes. But a lot of those tunes, like you're saying, a lot of them are a little too deep for the Bowie, like, classic
casuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's great music.
I shouldn't call them that. That's not fair, but
no, but I know what you mean. And a lot of those early records that have the hits on them too, the full record is such a journey.
Oh yeah. Like, I'd never, that was the other thing. Before this band, I'd never done a front to back of any of his records, and then started doing it. I was like, holy shit, this stuff is crazy. And, like, man, the stuff that, I mean, obviously I'm going to be listening with a little bit of a biased ear for bass lines, but Herbie Flowers is a bad motherfucker. Oh my God. Those lines are crazy. He's so good. And then, which I will admit in the beginning was a little daunting to be tasked with replicating those. Also because some of those old mixes are a little bit tough to hear exactly what's going on. But,
you go and find some of those live albums, and you hear what, like, he had that one rhythm section for a while. That is the rhythm section on Low and Heroes, and I think was also on the couple albums leading up to that, like Station to Station and a few of those where. And the bass line and the drum feel on the recording of Heroes, the classic tune of his, is real murky. But you hear the tour, the live album he did right after those two albums. It's called Stage. It was one of my favorite live records of his, and you can hear the kick drum and the bass, and it is so happening and so grooving. And you're like, wow. And then you go back and listen to the recording of Heroes or something, and you're like, oh, that's in there. It's just not they got so much other textures going on that it's not as clear. But
yeah, but it is trippy stuff for sure, which is fun because I will say it has influenced a lot of my stuff after I joined that band full time, as opposed to when I was just subbing for them. My original material has changed quite a bit since learning all this stuff, which is exciting. I mean, it probably should influence my my stuff. So,
well, and that's the best. It's well, I do like I do a cover band. I've done a variety of different cover bands, but right now I have a steady cover gig every Sunday. And when you're learning covers that are exciting and informing your original music, that's the best kind to be doing. So
absolutely.
What are you doing every Sunday?
I play in this band called Herding Cats over in a neighborhood of Seattle called Kirkland, but the band is called Herding Cats. It's a trio, and they've been playing in Kirkland on Sundays for over 20 years. It's kind of like an institution, and I joined a little over 2 years ago, and very quickly the lineup shifted again after I joined, to where the lead singer, who was the drummer, long story short, left the band to join the Beach Boys and is now the Beach Boys touring drummer. And so
no way.
So I got shifted into doing a lot of the lead vocal after that, which has been great because it's pushed me as a performer. And it's a gig I always look forward to, even though it's weekly. It always feels fresh. It's a great crew of people, and it's good repertoire.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, cool, man. Well, congrats. Just super quick. Unfortunately, we are starting to run short on time, which is, you guys have recently just done your Flat Earth tour. How was that?
Yeah. So thank you because I'd love to talk a little bit about this. Time flies when you're having fun conversation with fun people, about fun music. But the tour has been great. The Flat Earth tour is to promote a new record that we're dropping singles right now. So if you go look up General Mojo's on Spotify, Apple Music, we got singles dropping every month until the full record drops in January, February. And this tour was to get some new fans and promote the record. The record is called The Flat Earth Project. It's totally steeped in metaphor and has nothing to do with the world being flat. It's just kind of an evocative title that it's a concept record, and it kind of is part of the concepts in it. But the tour has been great. We played a lot of new places: Boston, upstate New York, Canada. And it's so cool to go and do that. And then you look at Spotify and you got new tunes coming out, and Spotify gives you a lot of information. I mean, Spotify is a beast. It's got it's pretty problematic. But one thing it does do is it gives you a lot of information on who's listening where. And, we come back from tour, and Toronto has like our second highest numbers of anywhere in the world as far as people streaming and listening. And you're like, that's what we wanted to have happen. And it's a good feeling. Awesome. Yeah. So
nice.
The tour's been great. We're about wrapped up on it. We got one more date. After the East Coast, we came back and played the Pacific Northwest for a few weeks, and that felt good to get back to our home turf, because we've been building audiences out here for a while, and it was great to come back and do all that. But no, the Flat Earth tour was great. If you're listening, please go check out the new music as it drops. We're really excited about this new release, and after that, there's a vinyl coming out too. So if you got a record player,
Oh, nice.
we'll do a pre-order shortly. And I'll be at my house packaging records and sending them out with
That's
so
sick.
much love and care. But yeah,
I will have to get one of those. I do have a turntable. I'll have to get one.
I think you picked up a copy of Cycles, which I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, no problem.
But no, this next one it's been a beast of an album, but it's finally coming together. And I got the test pressings about a month ago. Actually, I came home from tour and they were all at my house, and I threw them on, and just about, well, I cried initially when you hear something like, it's like hearing your music on the radio or hearing it on streaming for the first time, and you're like, that's it. And hearing it on vinyl is like, wow, it's physically something that has been made, and it's pretty special.
That's awesome, man. Congrats. That's so cool. I'm really glad that you guys are pardon me. I'm really glad that you guys are starting to pull a lot more listenership from Toronto, because hopefully that means you'll be coming back more regularly and we get to hang out more.
Totally, that's the plan.
I know that's very selfish sounding, but
No, that I'm looking forward to hanging more in the future, and maybe doing some shows together with your project.
oh, that would be a dream.
Yeah, we'll probably be back. We're still recovering from this East Coast. It's so much fun to go on the road, but it takes a lot of resources and a lot of work, and especially when you're going somewhere new, but it's also, you gotta, part of the name of the game touring is, as soon as you go somewhere, if you don't get back there within like half a year, it's kind of for nothing. Like,
Yeah.
as people start to lose track of you, and you got to keep the numbers fresh. That's one thing that I've learned leading a touring band for the past few years. Is we used to do these big tours. We used to do like one tour a year that would go down the West Coast, over to Texas, back up through Colorado, and through Idaho, and back here, and it'd be like 3 or 4 weeks. But we only did it once a year, and every time we'd get back to doing it, we would lose a lot of new audience members because it would have been too long. So hoping to get out to Toronto in spring, back to New York, back to all that, because we had a good time. So we definitely want to keep pushing that.
Right on. If you guys are able, it would be awesome to get you to come to Peterborough, which is the town that Pet Rock is out of. And I don't know how much. You know what? Just super quick. We're at the hour mark, so we're gonna. If you're cool to stick around for a sec, we can do an overtime thing that will go out onto YouTube and Spotify for anybody else that wants to pick up the overtime version of the podcast.
Cool. Yeah. I got
just.
Well, yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Let's wrap this portion up for sure. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Thanks so much for listening. Dune Butler from the General Mojos. You guys are so killer. Thanks for listening to 646 on Pet Rock Radio. My name's Dawson McManus. Have a good night, everybody.
Cheers, y'all. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, cool. That's good enough for ending it there, because there will be like an outro music thing. But okay, so welcome to the overtime of 646 that you can only get on YouTube and Spotify. We're still here with Dune, and I appreciate you sticking around for a couple of minutes. I don't know how much I can actually say about this, but something that is coming down the pike is Pet Rock is wanting to do some station-sponsored shows, and if we can swing it, if you guys are already somewhat in the area, it would be really killer to have you come to Peterborough, and I'm pretty sure we could pack a place.
Dude, that would be amazing. I mean, that would be enough. If you got dates that you're working on for that, that would be enough like I said, the Gustapalooza was kind of the impetus for us to come last time, and finding a few anchor dates for us to book around. We would absolutely love to do something like that. So please keep me in the loop on that.
Sweet. Yeah, 100%. I tell you what, I have a meeting with Brent on Friday, and I am absolutely gonna mention bringing you guys up, because not only are you a face melting band, but you guys are you're just cool as shit to hang with too. So,
thanks. Yeah.
And I think, if it's given the chance to be able to be on a bill with you guys, that would be an absolute riot for me. So I would love to.
So sign us up. That's we would love to do it. We'd absolutely love to.
Ah, killer. Sweet. Ooh, so something that is happening that's already getting booked is the station does the New Music Awards, and there's a show that goes along with the award ceremony. It's sort of like our station's version of the Grammys or Junos or kind of whatever. And we have performances and stuff. If we were to potentially book a show kind of maybe around that, because it's in May, I don't know if that would be a weird time slot.
No. That's probably when we're looking to come back, honestly.
Awesome. Because if we could set something up, because it's for the awards ceremony thing, it's just a couple of, it'd be like one or two tunes, but then be like, hey, there's a full length show, whenever. I feel like that might be not a bad way to entice a bunch of people, like, because like for the most part the room is going to be filled with other players, so you're definitely playing for people that know what they're listening to for the most part. So faces would be melted, and then other spectators and stuff would be like, holy shit, we gotta go see this. And yeah, and I'm sure there would be lots of pumping it up too. So I don't want to speak for anybody, but I know I certainly would be screaming at the top of the mountain.
Yeah, and I know it's always getting people into new music and on something is kind of the name of the game. That's what we're trying to do, right? But it's also it's hard. It's hard out there. So I appreciate you doing stuff like this and trying to rope it all together. Because that's really where, when you're an indie band, that's like the most important people, is getting support like that. So
yeah, absolutely. And I feel like the more of your own community you build when you're indie, the less brutal it feels anyway,
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I'm a firm believer of, the rising tide lifts all ships sort of thing.
Yeah. So it's very yeah. Hey, so I better run.
Yes, of course. So sorry.
I got that gig tonight.
Oh, that's right. I'm so sorry. Yes, I will. I'll let you go. But it was an absolute thrill to talk to you again, man. And I will get in touch with you as soon as I talk to Brent.
Cool, man. Yeah, thanks again for setting aside the time to do this. It's so much fun and really great talking to you. So much to connect on. And so this was such a treat.
Awesome. Thank you. I really appreciate your time. And if you can later, if you can send me like a list of all the socials and everything, it'll be in the description box below for people to check out your stuff.
Yeah, and let me know when this properly airs, because it'll air. This wasn't live, was it?
No.
You record good. Good.
No.
Let me know when it airs, and I'll post about it.
Yeah, absolutely. These are all like pre-record, like it's all banked. So this one is, I can't remember what order it's all in right now, but
yeah. Just let me know.
Also, if there's some stuff that you would like to use this to promote some upcoming things, we can we can jump the line?
Yeah, I think really, if this comes out sometime before the full length album drops, it would be great, and that's January, February.
Okay, yeah, we can make that happen.
Cool. All right. I'll be in touch with you.
Awesome.
Thanks, Skin Man.
All right. Thank you so much. Have a good night. Peace.
You too.